Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. This is our Intro to Free Motion Quilting class, and today's video we're going to go over the supplies that you might need and then also talk about long arm versus your domestic sewing machine. I'm going to do the videos primarily on my home sewing machine so that you guys at home know how to finish more quilts this year. But also I'm going to quilt this on my long arm as well. So we're going to be inserting footage. The colors are going to be a little bit different, so you'll be able to clearly tell what's what. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences from one to the other. So to get started, you're going to first want to get our pattern. It's free to download and it has instructions both if you're doing quilts as you go on your home sewing machine or if you're assembling your top first to quilt it on your long arm. So make sure that you know which one you're doing and you've got a game plan to go with that. I recommend that you use solid fabrics because we're going to be starting with stencils to sort of get our muscle memory down to learn the different designs. And it's just a little easier to see when you've got a nice solid fabric when you're getting started as opposed to like a really busy print. Also, feel free to use those prints that like you regret buying, but again, you might have a hard time seeing the stencil on there if it's a really busy print. So try to pick something that really doesn't have a lot going on so that way you can clearly see where it is that you're supposed to go. So if you're getting your own fabric, you want to make sure, we do have kits available, by the way, in 4 different colorways for you to use ours, because what we did was we wanted to design this program so that you didn't have a bunch of just random samples around. We wanted to give you guys a project that you could complete with it. So that's why we came up with the quilt pattern. And then we're going to work on our stencils. So the stencil, they're from Full Line Stencil. They're fabulous because they have sort of a screen printing technique to them. So this is the same material that we'd use if you screen printed a t-shirt. We do have these available in our shop, by the way. And what you do is instead of putting ink through, we're going to press some chalk powder through. And we're going to show you how to do that in just a second. But you're going to need to have the 4 stencils that we recommend to go with this. So we do have a stencil pack so you can get everything you need. It's going to have your stencils that you need. It's going to have the white pounce pad that goes away with heat. And then you'll have everything you need to go in terms of marking your quilt. A couple other things that you might want to consider. We're going to send you the ultimate white. It's going to show up on all of the solid fabrics that we're using to go with this. But in your everyday quilting life, it's good to also have a blue and a pink chalk. One or the other will always show up on your quilt, and sometimes you might have to use both depending on the lighting situation and the fabric combinations in your quilt. So it's always good to have both on hand. You're going to want a pair of quilting gloves. I love my Machiner's quilting gloves. You can see that I've used them a lot. They are tinged pink and blue. Once the color gets on the gloves, it's kind of there to stay, but it doesn't transfer back to your quilt, so you're fine. I recommend these over gardening gloves because the fingertips are the only part that has the grippy on them. And what it does is it allows you to move your fabric a whole lot easier without you getting all sweaty. And yes, I have tried the gardening glove hack, and let me tell you, there is no comparison. Just pony up for a pair of these. They're not that expensive. And they're also not very hot. I used to quilt with these in my sunroom where we had our previous video studio before we moved into this space. And I would do it with the AC off, with those on in the dead of summer, and I was not sweating from my hands being hot. So we're good there. You're going to want some good thread. I always use Aurifil 50 weight. I'm going to use white for this entire project. But if you want to get some matching thread, then that is up to you guys as well. This is a must-have. You are going to need a quilting foot. You're going to want to consult with your machine manufacturer to get one that goes with your machine, but you absolutely have to have this. Sometimes it's called a darning foot. So go to the place where you purchased your machine, get one that's compatible with your machine. You absolutely have to have this if you're going to be doing free motion quilting. There's no way around it. You also are going to want a walking foot. If you don't have it, this is really critical just for putting on binding, but especially when we get to the quilt as you go stage, you're going to need this. And we're also going to kind of mark out some designs to sort of mimic doing background filler. So you're going to want to have one of these. A marking tool is going to be helpful as well. One that goes away is perfect. I really love these friction gel pens because we're going to mark out some blocks on our plain blocks. That way we can go ahead and pretend like we've actually pieced a block but really we just drew one out and then stitched around it using our walking foot. One other thing that's really nice is an extension table. So this is something that you also want to talk to your machine manufacturer about. This is one that came with my machine when I purchased it 12 years ago, and it is still going strong. Just got it back from being cleaned and tuned up for this series. They also, Sew Steady makes clear ones that go with just about every model of sewing machine. Those are bigger than this one. What it does is it extends the space that you have to quilt on. So typically you're just going to have wherever this hole is and then a little bit beyond where that little compartment that holds all your sewing tools is. And that's just not a lot of space when you're trying to quilt on your home sewing machine, especially when you have a big quilt. So what this does is it extends your usable space and helps also lift up that quilt, because your enemy when you're quilting on your home sewing machine is going to be the weight of that quilt. And the more you can get it up, the less likely it's going to drag. So if you have a table, I don't, where your sewing machine sits in it, that's going to be your ideal. That's what you want for sure. Otherwise, an extension table is great to have. And if you're really just giving this a try and you don't want to spend a ton of money yet, just stack some books or boxes up next to it as well. You just want to make sure you use something sturdy enough to where it's not going to be slipping around and that it's level with your work surface, so that way you can easily move things around. And essentially this is kind of how it works. You set it down and then I have all this hand space that I can move around that I didn't have before. So that's really helpful. If you're able to get it or rig something up, I highly recommend it. Last thing that is nice to have but not a must-have is a dry erase board and a dry erase marker. So you can use scrap paper as well when we're sketching out our designs, but dry erase boards are great because when you're done practicing your design, you can do it as many times as you want, wipe clean in between until you feel like you've got it down and you're ready to translate that to stitching. All right, let's get in on how to fill up our pounce pad and how these guys work so we can get to sewing.